Here's a question almost nobody asks about their own pantry, and it is the one that actually matters. Not how many months of food do you have, how many calories per pound, and how many calories per foot of shelf. Because those are the two numbers that decide whether your food supply is a plan or a pile. A pound of dry rice runs somewhere around 1,650 calories, and it is wonderful. And I have plenty of it, and it needs clean water and a fuel source, and about 20 minutes of a burner going before it feeds anybody. A pound of dry beans is lower still, and needs even more water and more fuel. Now here's the other end of the scale. There's a food you can make in your own kitchen this afternoon out of 2 ingredients that runs somewhere in the range of 2,700 calories to the pound. Needs no water, needs no fire, needs no refrigeration, and fits in a coat pocket. The Red Cross list will never mention it. No store aisle carries it. After decades studying what households actually run short of, the shortage is almost never bulk. It is dense, ready, no cooked calories for the day. The burner is not an option. That food is pemmican, and by the end of this, you will know how to make it properly, which is not the same thing as knowing what it is. Quick note before we start. I am Cole Merritt, and this is general preparedness education, not professional, medical, or food safety instruction, and not a prediction about anything. This one involves drying meat and rendering fat, so I will give you the real safety numbers as we go, and there is one temperature in here that is not optional. Follow the Department of Agriculture's food safety guidance and your county extension office for your own situation, and if you are working with wild game, there are extra steps I will flag before the end. All right, let me tell you what it actually is, because it is almost insultingly simple, and that simplicity is the point. Pemmican is 2 things: lean meat dried until it is brittle and ground to a powder, and rendered animal fat poured over that powder and allowed to set. That is the entire food. No salt required, though a little is fine. No preservative. No sugar unless you want dried berries in it, which is traditional and optional. You press it into a cake or a block, it hardens, and it sits on a shelf. And here is why those 2 ingredients in that arrangement do what nothing else does. Spoilage needs water. Every microbe that would ruin food needs available water to live in, and food scientists measure exactly that. They call it water activity, and it is the real reason anything keeps. Drying the meat to brittle takes the water out of half the equation. Rendering the fat takes the water out of the other half, because rendering is not just melting, it is cooking the water and the meat solids out of the fat until what is left is pure. Then you combine 2 things that both have almost no available water, and you seal the powder inside the fat so air cannot get at it. There is nothing left for anything to live on, and the surfaces that would oxidize are coated. That is it. That is the machine. Now let me put it where it belongs. By name. Pemmican was invented by the indigenous peoples of the North American plains and subarctic, the Cree, the Blackfoot, the Assiniboine, and it was the Métis who later produced it at scale. And the word itself comes from the Cree. This was not a trick or a secret. It was an engineered food, and I use that word deliberately because that is what it is. It was made in enormous quantity from bison during the summer hunt, packed into rawhide bags called parfleches, and traded. Then the fur companies came through, and the Hudson's Bay Company built its entire inland transport system on it, because a canoe brigade paddling for months could not stop to hunt and could not carry fresh food. Bags of pemmican, on the order of 90 pounds apiece, were the fuel that moved the fur trade across a continent. It mattered so much that in 1814 there was an actual dispute over control of the pemmican supply on the Red River, which tells you exactly how strategic a food it was. And then it went to the poles. When the Antarctic expeditions of the early 1900s put men on sledges hauling their own weight across ice for weeks at a time, pemmican was the base of the sledging ration, because the calculation those men faced is precisely the calculation we started with. Every ounce you carry, you drag, and every ounce has to be worth its weight in energy. Here is the transferable lesson, and it is the reason I am teaching you this, and not another shelf-stable list. Every group in history that had to move, or had to survive on what could be carried, arrived at the same answer independently. Dried, lean protein plus rendered fat. Not because it was pleasant, because the arithmetic is unbeatable. All right, let me teach you to make it. 3 parts: the meat, the fat, and the marriage. Every one of them has one decision that decides the whole batch. Part 1, the meat And the decision here is how dry is dry. Use the leanest cut you can get. Bottom round, top round, eye of round, sirloin tip. Trim every bit of visible fat off it. And I mean every bit. And I know that sounds backwards in a food that is half fat. It is not. The fat you are going to add is rendered fat with the water cooked out of it. The fat left on the meat is raw fat with water and meat solids in it. And that is the fat that goes rancid and takes your batch with it. So you strip the meat down to pure lean and you add back the good fat later, under your control. That is the whole logic. Slice it thin, about 1/4 inch, and here you cut across the grain, not with it, because you want it to break apart into powder later rather than shred into threads. Then it dry. And here is the safety number that is not optional. The Department of Agriculture's guidance for making dried beef safely is that the meat should reach an internal temperature of 160 degrees. The clean way to do that at home is to heat the strips in the oven at that temperature first, then finish the drying at a lower setting, or to run a dehydrator and give the finished strips a short heat step. If you dry only at low temperature and never bring it up, you have made an ambient dried product with no kill step in it. And while people did that for centuries, you should know which one you are doing. I would rather you spend an extra hour with the oven on than roll dice on a food you are storing for years. Now the end point. And this is the part that separates pemmican, that lasts from pemmican, that quietly ruins itself. It has to snap, not bend, not flex, not feel leathery and tough. You should be able to take a finished strip and break it like a dry twig. And when it breaks, it should have a dry, pale, fibrous cross-section with nothing soft in the middle. Jerky bends, pemmican meat snap. That is the entire difference between the two products at this stage. Because if it bends, there is water left in it. And that water is going to sit sealed under a layer of fat in a jar in your closet for a year with nothing to do but ruin things. When it snaps, you grind it. A blender, a food processor, a coffee grinder, a mortar and pestle, or the old way, which is between two clean stones. You want it as close to a powder as you can get. Not flakes, not confetti, powder. Because powder packs dense and leaves no air pockets, and air pockets are where oxidation lives. Failure mode of part 1, stated plainly. Under-dried meat is the #1 reason home pemmican fails, and the cruelty of it is that you will not know for months. It looks perfect the day you make it. Then one afternoon next spring, you open the jar and there is an off smell and a soft spot, and you have lost the batch and cannot say why. It was the water you left in it in October. Cheap version of this stage, you do not need a dehydrator. An oven on its lowest setting with the door propped open a couple of inches with a wooden spoon will do it, and it is how most of the pemmican in this country gets made. Part 2, the fat, and this is the single most consequential decision in the whole video. You want rendered beef tallow. Specifically, rendered from suet, which is the hard fat from around the kidneys. And if you say the word suet at a butcher counter, almost anybody will know what you mean. Ask for it. In a great many shops, it is either free or costs almost nothing because it is a trim product with limited demand, and that is one of the genuine bargains left in a grocery store. Here is the mechanism, and it is chemistry, not tradition. Fats go bad by oxidation, and how fast they oxidize depends on how saturated they are. Highly saturated fats are chemically stable and oxidize slowly. Polyunsaturated fats oxidize fast. Beef tallow runs roughly half saturated fat, with most of the rest monounsaturated and only a small fraction polyunsaturated, which is why it sits at room temperature for a long time without turning. Lard from pork is meaningfully less saturated, and it will go rancid noticeably sooner. Vegetable oils and olive oil are worse still for this purpose, and coconut oil, while stable, stays soft and behaves badly in the block. This is not snobbery. This one choice is the difference between a food that keeps for years and a food that smells like old crayons by August. If you make one substitution in this entire recipe, do not make it here. The rendering method, with real numbers. Cut the suet into small pieces, or better, run it through a grinder or a food processor, because more surface area means it renders faster and at a lower temperature. Put it in a heavy pot on the lowest heat your stove has, or in an oven at around 250 degrees, and leave it. You are not frying it, you are coaxing it. Over 1 to 3 hours, depending on quantity, the fat will melt out clear and golden, and the solid bits, which are called cracklings, will shrink and settle. When those bits have gone brown and stopped bubbling, you are done. And the bubbling is the tell, because that bubbling is water leaving. When the bubbling stops, the water is gone. Strain the liquid fat through a fine sieve with a layer of cheesecloth in it into a clean, dry jar. And it should be clear, not cloudy. Cloudy means you left water or solids in it, and both of those are a spoilage clock you just installed yourself. Failure mode of part 2, rendering too hot, which scorches it and gives the whole batch a burnt taste that no amount of good meat will hide, and straining carelessly so that meat solids ride along into the finished block. Those solids have water and protein in them, and they are exactly what spoils first. Take the extra 2 minutes with the cheesecloth. Part 3, the marriage, and then the storage. The ratio is roughly half and half by weight, equal parts meat powder and rendered tallow. Some people push it to 60% fat because it binds better and carries more calories per ounce. And some go leaner because they find the fat-heavy version hard to eat, and both are within tradition. Start at half and half and adjust after you have made one. Here's how the assembly goes, and it takes about 10 minutes. Warm the tallow until it is liquid but not hot. Just barely melted is right. Put the meat powder in a bowl and pour the fat over it a little at a time while you stir, and keep going until every particle of powder is wetted and the mix will hold together when you squeeze a handful, roughly the consistency of damp sand. You are looking for coated, not soupy. Too much fat and it will be greasy and will not set properly. Too little and there will be dry powder in there with air around it, and that dry powder is exposed. Then press it. A loaf pan lined with parchment, or muffin tins if you want individual portions, or straight into small wide-mouth jars. Press it down hard because you are trying to drive out air pockets. And air is the enemy at this stage, the same way water was at the last one. Let it cool and set at room temperature, and when it is firm, you cut it into bars. Now storage, honestly. Cool, dark, and airtight, in that order of importance. A jar with a tight lid in the back of a cool closet is good. A vacuum-sealed bag is better. Traditionally, it was sealed inside a bag and the seams were closed with more melted fat, and that fat seal is exactly what a vacuum bag does today. Heat is the enemy, so a hot garage or an attic is the wrong place. And light matters more than people think, because light accelerates fat oxidation, which is why the old tins and the parfleches worked so well. Let me walk one batch through in real time so you can see what a Saturday of this actually looks like. Because on paper it sounds like a project, and in practice it is mostly waiting. Say you start with 3 pounds of bottom round and 1.5 pounds of suet. Morning. First thing, the suet goes into the oven at 250 degrees in a heavy pot, and you forget about it. While that is going, you trim and slice the beef thin across the grain, which takes maybe half an hour. The beef goes onto oven racks or into the dehydrator and comes up to 160 degrees internal, then drops to a drying temperature and sits. By late morning, your suet has stopped bubbling and gone quiet with brown bits settled at the bottom, so you strain it through cheesecloth into a jar and set it aside, and your kitchen smells like a roast, which is a pleasant surprise for most people. The beef takes most of the day. Around mid-afternoon, you start testing pieces, and the test is one motion. Take a strip out, let it cool a minute, and bend it. If it folds, it goes back in. If it snaps, that rack is done. Cooling matters, because a warm strip will feel soft and fool you every time. By early evening, it all snaps. You grind it in batches, and you have a bowl of pale brown powder that looks like nothing much. Then 10 minutes of stirring warm tallow into it. 10 minutes of pressing it into a lined loaf pan, and it sits on the counter overnight. Sunday morning, you turn out a block. Cut it into bars and put them in a jar. Total hands-on time across 2 days, maybe an hour and a half. Everything else was the oven doing the work while you did something else. Now, the variations, because people ask and one of them carries a trap. Traditionally, dried berries went in. Choke cherries, Saskatoons, service berries, and there is nothing wrong with that. It breaks up the flavor and adds something the plain version does not have. But understand the trade you are making. Dried fruit still holds some moisture, and moisture is the one thing we spent this entire video removing. So, a berry pemmican is a shorter storage pemmican. If you add fruit, make sure the fruit is dried hard, keep it to a modest fraction of the mix, and treat that batch as the one you eat this year rather than the one you put away for 3. Salt is the other common addition, and a small amount is fine and helps the taste. though it is not doing the preserving here the way it does in biltong or in a salt cure. In this food, the drying and the fat are doing that work. What I would leave out entirely is honey, syrup, or anything sweet and wet, and any nut or seed with a soft oil in it, because those oils are the unstable kind, and you have just undone your careful choice of tallow. And a word on how you actually use it, because a block of it in the closet is not much good if nobody knows what to do with it. You eat it as it is, in small pieces, and small is the operative word. A couple of ounces goes a long way. And eating a lot of it at once is unpleasant for most people. It also crumbles into hot water and turns into a passable broth if you have heat, which is exactly how it was used on the trail. But the reason it earns its shelf space is that it needs nothing at all. No pot, no water, no fire, no can opener, no 40 minutes of a burner running. It is the food you reach for in the hour when everything else requires something you do not have. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Eileen, who cooked for a Bitterroot outfitter for the better part of 2 decades, feeding hunting parties out of a canvas camp where the nearest store was 3 hours of bad road away. She made this by the flat pan every August, and she said the 2 things she had to teach every new hand were the same 2 things every year: dry it until it snaps and render until it stops bubbling. She said everything else about the recipe is forgiving and those 2 things are not. And she told me something else that I think about a lot. She said the men never once asked for it. They asked for it on the 4th day at 11,000 feet, when the weather had turned and nobody wanted to stop and cook. That is the honest use case for this food, and it is worth saying out loud. Which brings me to the honest part, and there are 3 things I owe you here. First, the title. It says never spoils. I am not going to defend that literally, and you would not trust me if I did made properly. Meat dried to a true snap, tallow rendered clear with the water gone, packed dense with the air pressed out, kept cool and dark and sealed. Pemmican keeps for years. There are credible accounts of it keeping for a very long time indeed under good conditions. Made poorly, with meat that still bends and fat with water in it, it will go off in a single warm summer. So the real answer is that pemmican does not have a shelf life so much as it has a quality of manufacture. The method is the shelf life. That is why I have spent this whole video on the 2 endpoints rather than on the recipe, because the recipe is 2 ingredients and a bowl. Second, the taste. And I am not going to sell you a story here either. This is not a snack. It is dense, it is fatty, it is fairly bland unless you add berries or salt, and the texture takes getting used to. The people who lived on it did not eat it for pleasure. They ate it because it was the most food per ounce that could be carried, and because it required nothing of them at the end of a hard day. Go in expecting fuel and you will be satisfied. Go in expecting a treat and you will be disappointed and you will have wasted a good roast. And the practical consequence of that is one you should act on. Make a small batch first and find out whether your household will actually eat it before you make 5 pounds of something that ends up as a science project on the shelf. Third, the hard lines. Do not make this from raw pork or from wild game without a proper kill step, because of the parasite risk that neither drying nor fat addresses. Game gets frozen or heated to the temperature your state wildlife agency specifies, and that guidance is free and easy to find. And if you open a jar and the smell is sharp, waxy, or like old paint, that is the fat gone rancid and the batch goes out. Rancid fat is a quality and palatability problem more than an acute danger, but it also tells you moisture got in, and where moisture got in, other things follow. Out it goes. Let me sweep the mistakes fast, because nearly every failed batch I hear about is on this short list, and none of them are exotic. Meat that bends instead of snapping, which we have covered twice because it is the big one. Leaving fat on the meat before you dry it, so you have raw fat with water in it hiding inside a food built to have neither. Rendering hot and fast, which scorches the tallow and taints everything. Straining lazily so meat solids ride into the block. Using lard because it was on the shelf and tallow was not, which will cost you most of your shelf life. Packing it loose so there are air pockets in the block. Storing it warm in a garage or an attic or a car, where the fat is essentially being slow cooked all summer and the one nobody warned you about. Making a huge batch on the first try before you know whether anyone in your house will eat it. Every one of those is avoidable, and every one of them is somebody's ruined afternoon. Let me give you the numbers so you can decide how much to make. A pound of finished pemmican lands somewhere around 2,700 calories, give or take with your fat ratio, because rendered tallow is roughly 900 calories per 100 grams, and dried lean meat is roughly 400, and half and half puts you in the middle. So 1 pound is more than a full day of calories for an adult who is not working hard. Compare that with a pound of rice at 1,650, which also demands clean water and fuel. 3 pounds of pemmican is 3 days of no-cook calories in a space the size of a hardback book. That is the argument in a sentence, and it is also the honest limit. This is a supplement to a pantry, not a replacement for one, because a person cannot live on it comfortably for long without other food, and nobody in history tried to. The cost, roughly. A cheap lean roast on sale plus suet that is often free or nearly free from the butcher counter, and 2 pounds of raw meat dries down to well under a pound of powder, so you should expect to buy about 3 pounds of raw lean meat and about 1.5 pounds of suet to end up with roughly 2 pounds of finished pemmican, which puts your dense, no cook, no water emergency calories somewhere in the range of what a decent restaurant lunch costs for a food that will still be there in 2 years. That is the trade, and I think it is a good one. One more practical thing, and it is about checking on what you made, because a food you never open is a food you are only assuming is good. Once every 6 months, open a jar and check it 2 ways. Smell it first before you touch it, because your nose will catch rancid fat long before your eyes catch anything. Fresh pemmican smells faintly of roast beef and clean fat and very little else. Fat that is turned smells sharp and waxy, a little like an old box of crayons, and once you have smelled it, you will never mistake it. Then break a piece. It should break firm and clean, and the inside should look the same as the outside. If there is a darker or softer core, you left water in the meat, and that jar is the one you eat first rather than the one you keep. Write the month on every jar when you make it, and rotate the way you would with anything else on the shelf. And make it in the cool half of the year if you can. Late fall through early spring is the right season for this in most of the country. For the same reason the plains hunt was in summer and the pemmican was made for the winter that followed. You want your finished food going onto the shelf just as the weather turns cool, not just as it turns hot. Here is your assignment for this week, and it is deliberately small. Go to a butcher counter, not the self-serve case, and ask 2 questions. Do you have suet? And what does a bottom round roast cost? That conversation takes 90 seconds, and it will tell you exactly what this costs where you live. Then make 1 small batch, about 1 pound of raw meat, 1/2 pound of suet. One afternoon, dry it until it snaps, render until it stops bubbling. Everything else you can adjust later, and I want to hear from you on this one, because a lot of the people who watch this channel come from families that actually did this. If your people made this, or made something like it, a grandfather who kept a tin in his truck, a hunting camp that had its own version, a family that pressed it with dried berries. Tell me about it below, including what fat they used, because the fat is where the real regional knowledge lives. The folks who write in here have corrected me more than once on exactly this kind of detail and made the next video better for it. And if I have a number wrong in this one, say so plainly. I read them, and I will pin a good correction. That is pemmican. 2 ingredients, 2 endpoints, and a food that carried a continent before anybody had a refrigerator to argue about. Pick the cheapest lean roast you can find this week and make 1 small batch. That is the whole assignment. Talk soon.